from wherever you're watching, in the morning, afternoon, night, whatever it is. Think about your day. If you're in the morning, think about what you're going to do today. If it's the afternoon, think about what you have done or what you are going to do. If it's night, think about what you've done through your day. And I want you to ask yourself this one question. Am I doing something and I don't even know why I'm doing it? We have a couple reports I do in my 9 to 5 where we just have a process and I've never really questioned it. And it made me think of this story I heard once. Ready? Okay. There was a husband who came home from work. His wife's making a pot roast. As he's watching her make the pot roast, he's like, "Oh, this looks great. What are you doing?" As he's watching his wife cut a part of the pot roast off, throw it out, and throw it into the oven, pan into the oven. He's like, why'd you do that? Like, what was it? Why'd you throw that? That was a good piece of meat. Why are you throwing it out? And the wife says, "Well, that's how pot roasts are made." And the husband's like, where did you learn that? And she says, "Well, I learned it from my mom." So husband calls his mother-in-law and says, "Hey, your daughter's making this pot roast and she just cuts off this end and throws it out. Why is that?" Mom says, "Oh, well, that's just how I learned it from my mom. That's how you make a pot roast." So he's confused and questioning, like, "Oh, I need to understand this. I need to get to the bottom of this." So he calls the grandma. He says, "Hey, your granddaughter is making a pot roast and she does this thing where before she puts it in the oven, she cuts off an end and throws it out. And she says that's how you did it. Your daughter, her mom says that's what you do. I'm just kind of wondering why that is." Grandma says, "Well, that's dumb. I did it. I cut that end off because I didn't have a pan big enough to fit." How many things in your life are you doing? You're cutting that end off, throwing it out because of what your mom, dad taught you. You're doing that because their mom, dad taught them something. Especially in our generation. I'm 30 years old. I'm about 30 years old. And there are things that you learn from your parents, if they're like 20, 30 when they had you, that they learned from their parents who were probably people who experienced the Great Depression. They experienced things differently than our parents did, who experienced things differently than we do now. Think about 30 years ago. Well, actually not even 30. No, even 30 years ago, the internet wasn't what it was now. 30 years ago when you had the internet, it was like, you had to plug it into your phone line and you had to wait for the beep, beep, beep. Nowadays, if you turn your computer on and it doesn't run automatically, you're like, "What is this? I'm calling for a refund with Spectrum, AT&T, and Verizon, and T-Mobile." And you're like, what is going on? Why is this so slow? Older people are like, that's just normal. Times have progressed, right? Have you progressed? Have you made changes? Have you done something different? Have you built yourself in a way that is growing with the times rather than doing things just to do them and you don't actually know what you're doing? Worse yet, and the example I use is having a zip, or what's called a shoelace shoe versus a Velcro or a slip-on, right? Have you adapted or have you accepted that things are different so you have to adapt to the situation? Like if you have a shoe with a shoelace, you know how to tie your shoe, right? But way back when you were a kid and you had a slip-on or a Velcro shoe, your parents probably gave you Velcro shoes because they didn't want to have to tie your shoes every time or shove your foot into the shoe when you were a kid. So they had Velcro. If you keep using Velcro and you see a shoe that has a shoelace, you're like, what is this? You never know what to do with it, right? On the flip side, there was an example that popped in my head and I thought of it and I just lost it. Darn. Wish I'd known. Oh! So when we were younger, my mom actually used to wrap the remote because she didn't want like crumbs and stuff getting into the remote. Ironically, we also weren't supposed to watch TV and touch the remote while we were eating because you get dirt into the remote that was wrapped, right? And I had a friend come over once, we were little kids, and he's like, "Why do you do this?" And I was like, "I thought this was just what you do." Also, there's times I've gone to that friend's house and I take my shoes off in my home. Like, I think it's gross. There's studies about it. Like, your shoes inside the house is just gross. I'm sorry if that... No, I'm not sorry that offends you. You should be offended. Like, it's disgusting what gets on your shoe, especially if you use a public bathroom. Now, the first time I ever went to my friend's, white friend's house. I'm allowed to say that on Google? I don't know. Went to a white friend's house and they're like, "Why are you taking your shoe off? Like, isn't that what you do?" I'm like, "No. Let's go upstairs and play with Legos." We went upstairs in shoes and I was like, this is weird. And I got home and I'm like, "Mom, why do we do this?" There are things that you're doing in your life that you don't even know why you do it. It's something your parents did, something you saw someone do, something your grandparents did when you hung out with them, something your friends did when you hung out with them. Like, this morning I had a cigar, and I burned the tip a little bit before I light it. So here's a fire, I burn it to char it a little bit, and then I pull away, so the flame's here, and it's on the heat. I don't think that's technically right. It might be completely wrong, and I just lost all my cigar aficionados here. But I did it because that's how I learned it legally years ago from my friends who smoke cigars when I didn't know how to smoke a cigar. I still do it to this day. I don't know if it's right or wrong. It's just habit. I can look it up. Someone tells me it's right or wrong. I still do it because it's just what I do. I cook a certain way because that's how I learned it. You cook a certain way because that's how you learned it. You season things a certain way because that's how you learned it. You add ice before you add water. You add water before you add ice, as I'm drinking this right now. What are you doing that you don't even know? You're not consciously thinking about what you do day to day. Like when you wake up, the first thought you have is probably like, oh God, it's another day. I gotta wake up and go do this. But you don't even know why you're waking up. Obviously, you know biologically why you wake up, right? But you wake up and you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to this job. I don't want to commute for an hour. I don't want to sit there and listen to Becky talk about her cats when we have 15 meetings I got to deal with. But you still do it anyways because you don't know what else to do. You haven't really learned anything else. You haven't done anything different. You haven't decided, I'm going to do something different. You're just unconsciously going through life. You're bumbling around, living on things that have worked for you before. Like you could literally have a rotary phone. If for you guys who don't know what a rotary phone is, it's 0 to 9, and you had to rotate it every time on the phone. I never had to use it. My parents did, right? Or do you know where the term roll your window up comes from? Nowadays, cars don't roll windows. There was literally a lever that you had to crank to roll the window up and down. Now it's just a button, right? Like up, down. You don't have to roll it, but we still say roll it. Or the save button on your computer is a floppy disk. And how many of you guys know what a floppy disk is? I am aging myself. This is weird. All right, I'm over it. There are things you do. You click the save button. You call it the save button. I still know it as a floppy disk. I'm sure I call it. Heck, do you know what a hashtag is? A pound sign. It's not a hashtag. It's a pound sign. Now you say pound sign, everyone's like, that sounds like a really weird sign you put outside one of those massage parlors kind of thing, right? But hashtag. Go through your day. Think about what you're doing every single moment. Not literally like, okay, I press this key because this key does this for that. You know what I mean. Y'all are smart people. Whenever you're talking to a friend, whenever you're cooking dinner, whenever you're cleaning, whenever you do something, just have a moment where you sit there for 10 seconds. 10 seconds. You can spend 10 seconds and be like, where did I learn to do that? Why do I do this? Does this still serve me? Is there a more effective and efficient way to do this? You can literally handwrite your notes and send it off. Sometimes it's nice to get a handwritten note. We have a neighbor who sends handwritten notes. It's nice. I write handwritten notes for my wife. I put little sticky notes. I write on the mirror. Husband, that's a great little tip for you right there. But if you want to get messages out really quick, like, hey, I'm at the grocery store. What do you want? Are you going to write a note and drive it over to your partner or mail it? No, that's stupid. You're going to text them, hey, this is what we're missing while you're at the grocery store. Or you're going to call them and say, hey, this is what we're missing at the grocery store. Even better, you're going to FaceTime them and say, hey, this is what we're missing at the grocery store, from the grocery store. Take a second to just stop and think about the things you do. Do it with like little tiny things, like why do I pour ice and then water, or why do I pour water then ice? I pour my ice first and then my drink. Because otherwise if you put the ice in, it splashes and I'm like, ugh, gross, I have to clean that up now. I'm weird like that. Little things like that are practice for when you decide to say, when you and your spouse, or you and your partner you and your boss get in a fight or argument, and you're like, and they ask you, why do you keep doing this? And you've had that practice in the little things to say, actually, this is why I do it. And I don't really have a reason to keep doing that. Your partner's going to probably be annoyed a little bit. Most partners are going to get annoyed because they're like, why do you have to go introspective about everything? Just, if you need to do it, just do it, right? Like you need to mow the lawn, you don't need to think, okay, how do I measure the 3 inches and do this and take this time? Did I charge the battery 80% so it's not overcharged, blah, 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 blah. Is the weather too hot for the battery? Things like that. I use the battery Ryobi. I think I have to now say this is an advertisement, but I'm not getting paid by them, so I'm not going to say that, because until they pay me. Anyways, rather it's like when you are mowing the lawn, oh, why do I mow in this direction? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? So that when you have the tough conversations with your boss, with your kids, with your spouse, you can say, I'm not sure why I do that. Can I have a second to think on it? Like for the longest time, I was really bad about being on time. I don't know if it's the Islander Filipino in me or just how I learned. Actually, no, I know why. My dad used to put clocks ahead of time. So the oven would be 5 minutes, the microwave would be 8 minutes, this random clock would be 12 minutes, and I'm like, I don't even know what time it is, so I don't care. I didn't consciously say, I don't care. I just thought, whatever, we'll get there when we get there. Now it's like, you have it on, everything's like synced, right? So I know the time immediately. But I've always had that problem, like, I see the time, okay, I got 10 extra minutes. And I'm very on time rather than being early. My wife was like, you don't respect my time. Like, oh no, I'm sorry. It's not that I don't respect you, don't respect your time, it's just, these are patterns I learned. And she'd say, like your partner's gonna say, why do you need to keep doing that? It's a great question. I want you to think about that. What are the things you're doing that you probably don't even know you're doing, that you haven't questioned, and now you're thinking like, oh, why do I do that? Think about that. I'm Lawrence with Candle. Good morning, good afternoon, good night. If you want more resources, go below in the description. You know where to go. Hope you have a great day. I hope this makes you think a little bit about what you're doing. Don't spend all day wondering, why does this Excel spreadsheet do this? But instead, take a moment to say, I talk like this with my spouse because this is how I learned to talk with them, but I don't really know why I continue doing that. I should think about that. Let me consider if that's still working for me or not working for me. And this is one of the basic tenets of our coaching program. Rewriting stories that you tell yourself to live the better life. Like, you have it within you. You're not broken. There's nothing to be fixed. Everything that you've done has led you to this point. It's giving you the experience you need to be here. You just don't know what you're doing. You just don't know how to do it. So, until then, do you learn? Peace, love, and light. Good morning, good afternoon, good night from wherever you're watching. Have a great day. Until next time.